What's up, everybody? Welcome to another channel of Machine Head Repair Project. And today we're going to be working on this 2003 Acura RSX. And what the project we're going to be doing on this is we're going to change and remove and install the front suspension. So if y'all been following my channel, I've been working on this RSX as a project. So I've been doing some few body works and some other stuff on it. So if you follow my channel, there's a lot of other stuff on this RSX that you'll be seeing that has been a project on it. So just subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of the work on this RSX. So but on this project right now, we're working on the suspension, the front. So for the front suspension, to access the suspension, to remove them, you have these 1, 2, 3 nuts that looks like 14 millimeters on the driver's side, and then on the passenger side, you got the same thing, 1, 2, 3 nuts, 14 millimeters. But before we remove those, we need to jack up the vehicle and then take the two wheels off and then remove from the bottom sides that connects to the knuckle of the wheel. So the part that I'm going to be using to install and replace on the RSX are these two front ones here that you see. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to reuse the springs that are on the original. I think this is the aftermarket springs for lowering the vehicle, but we're gonna change out the struts and the shocks on this and exchange the springs onto this and install it onto the vehicle. So with this part, I ordered it online. You can go on eBay, Amazon, or whatever auto parts store that you want to go to and order the part that may fit that vehicle. Basically, they're all the same way of installing and removing, so I'll be showing you how to remove it and then installing it back onto the vehicle. So on this project, you're going to want to jack up the front end and remove both driver's side and passenger side wheel. Once you have your vehicle jacked up, make sure you use jack stands just for safety. Now we're going to remove the driver's side and the passenger side wheel. So once you remove the wheel, now you can access the shocks. And there's a few things that you're going to need to remove. So going underneath here, you got the bolt here that bolts onto the outer tie rod that leads to the inner tie rod. Once you've taken the wheel off, now you have access to remove the bolts and nuts suspension below where the wheel is connected to the knuckle. So first thing you want to do is, right here are the tie rods, and this is the outer tie rod, and there's a cotter pin that goes in here that you need to remove, and then we're going to remove this nut, and then we'll separate this outer tie rod from the suspension. Next, we're going to loosen up all these bolts that is mounting the brake lines to the suspension, and we're going to remove that. And then you just have these 1, 2 bolts and nuts that is mounting this knuckle to the suspension. And from there, we can go from the top and take these 3 14 millimeter, and then the suspension will just drop. So let's go ahead and get that done. So this nut right here is going to be a 19 millimeter, and we'll go ahead and break that loose. Once you remove that, you're gonna need a tool. It's like a C clamp where you can press this tie rod up. Outer tie rod, we're gonna need a tool that looks like this, and it's gonna go in place like so, and then we're gonna put a socket wrench right here, and it's going to push that up. So we're gonna put a socket, and then it's gonna loosen that up just like that. You don't want to get a hammer and bang on that because it'll mess up the thread on that. And that's how you remove that part. So now back here you got the lines to the brakes, and they're going to be, one's going to be a 10 millimeter that you're going to loosen up, and that loosens all this cable, and the other one is a 12 millimeter. Right there. So you got a 10 millimeter that holds this, and a 12 millimeter that holds this one. And then we'll just pull that to the side. And now we're going to remove this bolt and nut for this bottom part that's holding this knuckle to the suspension. So 1, 2, 1, 2. The size that's going to fit these nuts and bolts, the bolt is going to be a 19 millimeter, and then the other side is going to be a 22 millimeter. So I'm going to use my socket on 19 and my impact on 22. And then I'm going to get my rubber mallet, knock that loose, and knock that one loose. You want to go ahead and keep these nuts and bolts together. From there, you want to get a pry bar, stick it in there, and just kind of pry it out. And then there's your lower suspension, and it's loose. Now we're going to attack the top part, and then the suspension should loosen up. So last but not least, we got these 3 bolts up here, and they're 14 millimeter. And we're going to go ahead and get the impact and remove it. Now once you loosen this up, the suspension is going to drop. So before I loosen that last bolt or nut, let me show you when the suspension will fall when it loosens up. So I'm loosening the last nut from the top, and now I'm going to remove the shocks. This is the driver's side. Here's a side-by-side comparison of what we're going to be replacing with the new one, and here's the old one. As you can see, where the tie rod is connected to this rod here, just like this one, the knuckle will bolt onto this section, and then you got these little connection where you got the 12 millimeter and the 10 millimeter bolts in the cables for the brakes. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the springs here. Okay, we're going to squeeze them in, We're going to squeeze in the springs, and then we're going to loosen up this nut right here to take this top part off and transfer the springs over to this shocks, and then tighten it, and then tighten this top part off, and then it'll be one assembly again, and then we'll install it onto the vehicle. So the same thing I did on the driver's side, I'm going to do on the passenger side. And that's the removal on the passenger side. So right now the suspension is removed on the driver's side. And the passenger side. Alright, so on this project right here, what we're going to do before we put everything back onto the car is we're going to remove this spring and the top part of this strut, and we're going to move that over to the new one. And for that to happen, we're going to use this strut spring compressor set. So with this tool right here, basically we're going to clamp down the spring on each side and compress it, squeezing it together so it can loosen this part up, and then we'll transfer that over to the new one, and then put the top part of the struts on with the spring, and then we'll release this, and then it'll tighten up on the new struts. Let's go ahead and get that done. So basically, for this to work, you're gonna slide these in. You're gonna slide them into the spring like so, and then lock these pins in, and then you're gonna get a socket, and you're gonna turn this. You keep on turning it until, let me get that washer down, until it goes all the way down, and then squeezes the spring together. Sometimes you can do this with one, and sometimes you're going to need two to squeeze both sides of the springs down. Alright, so let me get my socket and then we'll put it on here and we'll tighten that down. So I had to turn it around, that way this will be clear, that way I can put the socket on there. When it was on this side, it was against this top part and I couldn't put my socket into it. So with this being said, we have it here clear. Now we can tighten this up, and we're going to go clockwise, and the tighter it goes, the spring will squeeze together. Alright, so right now the spring is squeezed together, so this is now going to be loose, and we're going to go ahead and loosen this up right here, and then it will be removed. As you can see on this side, that's all it is a bolt that's holding it, a nut, and so everything else this is just a rubber cover and the spring. So once we take that out, we'll be able to put this onto that. So with that nut right there, let's see, this is actually a 17, so we'll go ahead and loosen that up. So I'm going to get an impact and then remove that. Get my impact gun here. Since that is spinning around, we'll put this here. That way it'll stop it from spinning. So the nut, to remove this nut, we're gonna have to put an Allen wrench right here, and this Allen wrench is a 6mm. So we're gonna have to stick it in here and then turn it with a 17mm wrench. So we have the 17mm wrench here. Slap that on there. Now we're just going to loosen that nut. After you loosen that nut up, we're just going to remove the nut and take that off. Remember this top spring cover? Well, what we'll do is go ahead and pull the whole spring assembly off. Just like so. And then, as you can see, this strut is no good anymore. If you can push it in like this, that makes it a bad strut, because with it compressed, that it should push out by itself. It should be hard to push in, because that's air shocks, and that's what keeps your car from bouncing. So I just wanted to show y'all and better lighting here that this is the old shocks that was on the car. And then if you can do this with your shocks, this is a bad, I guess this is called Struts. This is a bad Struts or shocks or whatever it's called. Anyway, besides the point, this should have a lot of pressure where you shouldn't be easily push it in. I'm barely touching it and it's going down. When you push it down, it should automatically press up by itself. Okay, so when the car sits on this, you know, there's a lot of weight that sits on this, and this is supposed to hold the vehicle up. And because this is bad, it won't do that, and you're going to hear a lot of banging noise. So this is a bad Strut. So with this new one, as you can see, there's a little spring on there. We're going to push this down, right? And then we're going to remove that out of the way, and you're going to see that this is going to go back up by itself. Just like that. So it's going to be hard to press in like this, and it's going to go back up. See, I can't. This is a good shock or Struts or whatever, however you want to call it. But this right here is what you need, and it'll keep your car from, you know, feeling all the speed bumps and potholes and stuff like that, and the banging noise. So this is what we're going to replace on the new one. So we're going to go ahead and put the spring on here, bolt it down or nut it, screw it down, and then go ahead and put it back into the car. So I put the spring and the assembly back, put on the new shocks and Struts, and then let's see, go ahead and tighten this down. Just like that. And now what we're going to do is go ahead and remove, loosen up the spring so it can tighten up. Alright, once you loosen up the springs, now it should be nice and tight and snug. We'll remove this pin here. We'll go ahead and take this out. Sometimes it's kind of a challenge to remove the tool out from where you need to take out. So once you put the spring back on, this is what it looks like. You know, you can always purchase the whole assembly with the suspension springs. You don't have to just buy the Struts itself and then take the spring off and transfer it over to the new one. You can always buy it a whole kit where it's all together. But of course there's going to be a price difference. So this is what it looks like when you put the spring on. Make sure you have it against this little edge here, and then there you have it. So let's go ahead and put this back on the car, shall we? So when you put this new part up into the area, you want to first, it's always good to have two hands with this, because one person will be down here and holding up while the other person will bolt it on. But with this case, what we're going to do is we're going to guide the suspension into the hole and then try to do one nut at a time. Alright, once you have it lined up into that hole, we'll go ahead and tighten it, not tighten it down, but at least enough where it's up, raises it up,
we'll tie it up at the end, and it's going to be a 14 millimeter. And from there, we're going to go down below and then connect everything. Alright, so we're down here now, and we have the suspension. So we're going to go ahead and put the knuckle onto the shocks here. And because it's new, it's going to be quite tight. You can put the outer tie rod into the little slot there. We can go ahead and put the nut on that just to hold it. And then we'll just slide this. Once you get that in place, then we'll go ahead and get the nut and bolt here and stick them in. You got to line them up. We'll put one there, start it out. Get this other one here. Put that in there. And put the nut on. Remember, this side right here, the nut is going to be a 22, and this one other side is going to be a 19 millimeter. And then this right here for the outer tie rod is that 19 millimeter as well. And then you got these other lines here for the brake. This one here is a 12, and that screws into here. We'll just put that there, get that started. And then you have this other line here that you want to stick in. And this is going to be a 10 millimeter. And that goes right there. So we're going to go ahead and get our 19 and 22 and tighten that down. Alright, so we have here our 19 and our 22. Torque that down. If I remember correctly, it should be torqued down to about 119 or 120 something foot-pound. And then with our 10 millimeter back here, with our one of the brake lines, actually this cable right here goes to a wheel sensor, and then this line right here is the brake line. So what I'm tightening down right now holds mounts the wheel sensor. Okay, and that's a 10 millimeter. And the other one that holds the brake line is a 12 millimeter. There you go. So now we're gonna tighten up the 14 millimeter on the top under the hood, and that makes this project complete. It's fairly simple when you have the tool and you have the patient. We're gonna go ahead and tighten this down, and at the same time there is a cotter pin that we need to stick into there. So let's go ahead and do that. So right there is a 19 millimeter for the outer tie rod. Go ahead and tighten that down. Alright, and then we'll get a cotter pin and put it on there. So I have my cotter pin. I'm going to stick it in, and then I'm going to bend the two ends sideways. Last but not least, now we tighten this up. I want to say 90 foot-pounds. Here's a tip. Make sure this right here is not too high that it will hit the hood. So when you close the hood, it's not going to bang on top of it, then it's going to leave an indentation or a dent into your hood. Sometimes it'll come with a rubber that will cover this and protect the hood and this, and some will not. This in this case is not high enough to hit that. Alright, after that we're going to put the wheel on, and then it'll be complete. So let's go ahead and do the other side. Well, I hope this video has been helpful. If you liked it, please click the like button below. If you have any comments or questions, please leave it down below. Till next time.
Perfect.